Welcome to the Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day, and we're zoning in on Zimbabwe tonight, where the economic wheels are coming off again. Let's start with a look at inflation, one of the indicators of whether an economy is healthy or not. Inflation, of course, is the rate at which prices are rising generally. When it spirals out of control, the consequences can be devastating. Goods in shops can rise dramatically overnight. Salaries can't keep up, so those goods become unaffordable for working people. It's even worse for those trying to live on a pension or some sort of fixed income. Well, Zimbabwe's inflation right now is unknown because last week the government said that it was suspending consumer price inflation data, the release of that for the next 6 months. So basically putting that under the carpet for now. It's being seen as a sign of desperation. Here is the inflation data that we do have for Zimbabwe for the last few months, and you can see what sparked the flurry in Zimbabwe, rising slowly and then coming in at a whopping 176% in June. That's the official rate. That means that prices have nearly tripled since the same month, since June last year. Only Venezuela is higher than Zimbabwe. And now this is the official rate. If the unofficial black market exchange rate is used, economists have estimated that inflation could be, in fact, at more than 550% in Zimbabwe at the moment. While Zimbabwe's economy is set to shrink this year due to factors such as drought, severe power cuts, fuel shortages, a lack of investment in productive sectors. Previously, the government estimated growth of 3%. Now the finance minister, Mtuli Ncube, has revealed that they're expecting a contraction of 3%.
GDP growth this year will be negative. Yeah, negative. We're expecting something in the order of -3% as the government. In the budget, I didn't mention the figure because there are too many figures doing rounds. So, but we're expecting -3%. I must say this, that I expect two sectors to surprise us on the upside. It's mining and it's tourism sector. Tourism sector is always low-hanging fruit. You can't get into big falls, hotels are full, we need more hotels. It's a fantastic sector, jobs for foreign currency earnings as well. In the mining sector, the government is doing a lot in driving that sector. It's going to be easily a $12 billion industry in terms of additional investment over the next 3 years. So those two sectors will surprise us on the upside, but naturally agricultural sector is down, manufacturing is flat, but the issue is really agriculture and then the electricity and so forth as part of GDP. That's where we are heading.
Well, with power cuts of up to 18 hours per day, Zimbabwe's economy is losing an estimated $200 million weekly due to the prolonged power crisis. Fears are also growing that some companies will shut down within a month or so if government fails to come up with an urgent solution to the rolling massive power outages at the moment. A deal has been struck with Eskom in South Africa after some of Zimbabwe's backlog was paid to our power utility. Authorities are now trying to assure industries that power will be restored soon.
The economy has no fuel. The economy has no electricity. And on electricity, it is actually affecting productive capacity because our industries, instead of performing on a 3-day shifts, they are now performing on a 1-day shifts with all the contract workers sent home. So maybe the resources that we are accumulating as surpluses should be used to import or procure those economic enablers in form of electricity, in form of fuel.
The arrangement that we've put into place now on electricity should hopefully guarantee us increased supply from tomorrow or Wednesday. We have been engaging with the suppliers of electricity, whom I would not want to mention because it's not my role to mention them, but we have actually agreed on some of the repayment terms of the debt. I think the first installment was made last week. We are going to be making weekly installments for the legacy debt, and we have also agreed that we'll then pay on a current basis for the supplies that we are now going to be using.
All right, so let's stay with Zimbabwe. Research consultant for the Institute of Security Studies, that's South African-based, Derek Matyszak. He's based in Zimbabwe for our own ISS. He says Zimbabwe is at a tipping point. He joins us via Skype from Harare now. Derek, thank you very much. How bad is it?
Well, you mentioned in your intro that the wheels are falling off. I think the wheels have, in fact, come off. You saw Finance Minister Mtuli saying that there was hope in getting some foreign currency income through mining. But the mines, of course, require electricity in order to operate. Agriculture as well, it requires that the crops are irrigated, winter crops like wheat, and that also requires power to do that. And the difficulty is that the economy gets into a downward spiral, where if the mines are not exporting, they are not generating the foreign currency, which is required to buy the inputs for manufacturing, to buy the inputs for mining, to buy the inputs for agriculture. So those three subsectors of the economy decline even further. Less export receipts come in, and you get into this downward spiral. And unless that downward spiral is immediately halted, there may be no coming back.
The government has said, look, there is hope because of the deal with Eskom. Remember, Zimbabwe owed Eskom huge amounts. They tried to pay back some. An official there from the Treasury, from the Finance Ministry, hinting that there could be an announcement in a few days. Could that reverse things if Eskom gives Zimbabwe access to a lot of power right now?
Well, it would have to be a lot, and we're very skeptical that Eskom has a lot of power to give. I think the supplies that come from Eskom are likely to come in off-peak hours, and already Zimbabwe's industry is running, the factories that are still running, they have shifts for their workers from 10 o'clock at night to 6 o'clock in the morning, and also that's not 5 or 7 days a week. Zimbabwe is currently getting about 900 megawatts of power. It needs to function properly about 1,800 megawatts of power. So we would need Eskom to supply nearly 1,000 megawatts of power to stop this decline from happening. It seems more likely that the government should be looking for power from Cahora Bassa through Mozambique.
So the situation sounds so desperate. Try and explain what it's like to live with inflation, according to some estimates, at 550%. What does that mean for Zimbabweans going to the shops? And then how much industry is actually going on? How many companies are actually doing anything that requires jobs that means that they could expand in future?
The difficulty for the average Zimbabwean worker, and that's those who are lucky enough to be in employment, is that they are paid in the Zimbabwean currency. And the Zimbabwean currency is declining against the US dollar. And most prices are fixed against the US dollar. And that means the purchasing price of salaries is massively eroded, and it's causing social unrest. People are literally not able to make ends meet. And some people see no point in going into work because their transport costs exceed their salaries. The inflation issue is tricky, and to some extent the finance minister was justified in doing the blackout on inflation, because one's comparing apples with oranges to some extent. You're comparing the prices set a year ago, which were in these RTGS dollars, with the prices that are set today in a more formalized version of the Zimbabwean currency. So it is very tricky. You can play around with the numbers. You can refer to a previous figure which was in US dollars and then compare it with a figure now in RTGS dollars. The irony, of course, is that Mtuli Ncube imposed that blackout to stop people playing around with the numbers, but he himself has been playing around with those very numbers in presenting his budget.
Derek, very, very quickly, the Zimbabwean government is insisting on its own currency, saying that's the best solution right now. Is it?
It's not a solution. It will certainly help the fact that we don't have physical cash on the streets. There's no cash. 96% of all transactions are done electronically, and this does cause difficulties. So if there's a paper form of this electronic money that's floating around, that will assist, but it's not a solution to the economic crisis.
All right, Derek Matyszak, a research consultant for the Institute of Security Studies. He's based in Zimbabwe. The ISS is based here in South Africa. Coming back.